I have the best console and controller settings for you. Season 15 just dropped, and with the release of the new Legend Catalyst, and of course, the new map, Broken Moon, there is more players playing Apex Legends than ever before. And you want to be at the top of your game, as with the huge influx in the player base, there's going to be a huge influx in the competition you have. I'll be going through video settings, audio settings, gameplay settings, controller settings, including both default and ALC sensitivities. And without further ado, drop a like, and we are into the video options. So for video settings, in your brightness, I recommend having this a little bit higher than normal, somewhere between 50% and 100%. The reason you don't want to have it too low is if you put it down too low and you see someone in a corner like this or something, there's no shot you're going to see them. So if you have it too low and someone's in a dark area of the map, you will not be able to see them. That's why we want to have it a little bit higher. If you have it all the way maxed out, you'll be able to see all those little dark areas in the map. However, your game kind of looks bad because it just looks washed out. So do keep it somewhat high, but not all the way up to the top unless you want your game to look washed out. FOV, you want to keep it somewhere between 110 and 90. I play on 110. If you move it all the way down, you're super zoomed in. It's easy to hit your shots. However, you can't see very much stuff around you. If you move all the way up to the top, you see a lot more on your screen. However, it can be a little bit harder to hit your shots just because enemies do appear smaller. But I am playing on 110. FOV scaling, you want to keep this disabled. If you keep it enabled, this is me normally running. And then if I have FOV ability scaling on and I stim, I zoom out really hard. See that? My FOV changes drastically. If I'm aiming down and I'm trying to fight this enemy, I'm shooting, pew, 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 pew. I'm trying to fight this enemy, but then I stim. You see my aim changes drastically and it can be really hard to hit your shots. If you have FOV ability scaling on, so you want to keep it disabled. Sprint view shake, you want to keep this on minimal. There's no reason to run it on normal. Keep this on minimal. Audio, master volume, doesn't matter too much. Personal preference. Sound effects volume, you want to keep this on 100%. The reason you want this on 100% is because of footsteps. Sound effects volume affects your footsteps, and you always want footsteps to be as loud as possible because if you're fighting an enemy, you're doing something, and someone pulls up behind you, they start walking up behind you, and you don't hear them, you are dead for sure. DEAD, you are dead if they're pulling up behind you and you don't hear them. Now, if you have it all the way on 100%, you're much more likely to hear those footsteps and be able to turn around and get the shot on your enemy. Dialogue volume doesn't matter too much. I keep this below sound effects volume just so it doesn't obstruct the actual sound effects. Music volume, if you want to be super try hard, keep this on 0% so that you can focus on these sound effects. However, as a content creator, as just like a casual player most of the time, I like to keep this on 53%, 45%, somewhere around there. It's just entertaining having the music on. Going over to gameplay, interact prompt style, I have this on compact. If I have it on default, then you see when I'm picking up stuff, for example, if I'm trying to grab a gold backpack, takes a huge amount of my screen. I can't even see the enemy in front of me. I would not be able to tell if there's an enemy there if I have it on default. Switching it over to compact makes that a lot smaller and doesn't obstruct my screen as much. Button hints, I keep this off. I've played the game for long enough. I don't need button hints at all. Now, if you do have it on, it lets you know what button does what. So it lets you know what button to ping things, lets you know how to pick stuff up, lets you know what your different abilities do if you look at the bottom. But if you're fairly used to the game, you can turn this off, less clutter in your screen, makes it a little bit cleaner. Crosshair damage feedback, you want to keep this off. If you have it on, it just adds a lot of clutter when you're shooting enemies like this. You see that little X around the thing I'm shooting? That just adds clutter to your screen. It makes it harder to see what you're shooting at. If you have it off, super simple. Damage numbers, I have this on stacking. It gives you the information you need, it gets you that number, but it doesn't obstruct too much of your screen. Ping capacity, you want that on faded just so you can see through your pings when you need to. Obituaries on, doesn't really matter too much, but I do keep it on. Menu rotation, this is personal preference, depends on what game you're coming from. I keep this off. If you do want it on, feel free to keep it on. Weapon auto cycle empty, I have that on. Auto sprint, I have this on. Just makes it so I don't have to push down on my sprint button to start sprinting. I just start moving forward and I start sprinting. The good thing about having auto sprint on is that you don't have to keep on mashing your thumbstick to sprint. It could be okay to do that. It doesn't affect you too much. However, if you do that for a long time, you're going to start getting stick drift. If you're mashing down your left or your right thumbstick over and over and over by doing that just to sprint, you'll get a ton of stick drift in no time. So that's why I recommend having it on auto sprint. Double tap to sprint doesn't matter because I do have auto sprint enabled. Jetpack control, you want this on hold. This makes it so if I switch to Valkyrie, I have to hold jetpack to use it. The good thing about that is if I spam it, I can use it really fast and get that increased movement speed. If I switch it to toggle and I spam it, it doesn't work as fast and I don't get as much of a movement speed increase. Okay, incoming damage feedback, keep this on either 2D or 3D. Personal preference, but do not put it on 2D and 3D just because it adds way too much unnecessary clutter. 2D or 3D, I keep it on 3D. Now this is arguably the most important setting to switch in Apex Legends if you're on controller, especially taking damage closes death box or crafting menu. You want to turn this off just because if you have it on, then anytime you take damage, you're automatically going to close a death box. Now that might sound like a good idea, but it's actually really bad because if you're trying to armor swap and you take a fraction of a damage, you're going to lose that armor swap. You're going to get out of that death box and you won't be able to grab the armor. Pop up, personal preference, I leave this on. Streamer mode, I keep this off. Sometimes I switch it on if I'm streaming, but usually I have it off. Anonymous mode, I usually have this disabled. If I do find people are targeting me just because of my name, they see YT or they see a CD in the kill feed and they're focusing me, I will switch it to enabled. Usually I keep it disabled though. Usage sharing, enabled. Cross-platform play, enabled. Performance display, I usually have this off. I will switch it on if I'm lagging or if I'm getting FPS drops. So if I switch it on, you see in the top right, I can see my FPS, I can see my ping and everything else going on. If there is something going wrong, I will switch it on so I can see exactly where it is. But for the most part, I keep it off just so there is less clutter on the screen. Club invites, I'm already in a club, so I don't need club invites, disabled. Communication filter, everybody. Reticle, I use the darkest red possible right there. Just because if I switch it to a normal, so that's like a default type of reticle. See, I get this bright red ring around my reticle. Now, if I switch it all the way down to the darkest red possible, see, that kind of goes away and I just get like a little red dot sight. Of course, it's personal preference, but for me, having this reticle makes it a lot easier to see what I'm shooting at, and I'm just a lot more consistent when I am using this almost invisible reticle. Laser sight, this doesn't matter at all to be honest, but I do have it again, dark red. Colorblind mode, I have that off. I used to play on Deuteranopia if you're wondering, but now I have it off. Subtitles off. Enable accessible chat features off. Disable voice chat off. Convert incoming voice to chat text off, and play incoming text chat as speech. Keep this off. Going over to controller, what you guys all want to see. Starting off on button layout, I have it on customize, crouch, left thumbstick, sprint, and toggle zoom, right thumbstick, and melee B. And then crouch, I like to have this on left thumbstick because it allows me to spam crouch without moving my aiming thumbstick. So you aim with your right thumbstick, that is what you're going to be aiming with. So you don't want to be using your right thumb for anything except for aiming. So if you have crouch on either B or right thumbstick, then you're going to be using your right thumb in order to actually crouch, which messes up your aim in the long run. So if you switch it over to left thumbstick, you'll find you'll be able to spam crouch while still hitting your shots. Stick layout on default, interact/reload button. I keep this on tap to use and reload so I can do everything a little bit faster. You do find that you're trying to reload against doors, but you can't do it on this setting. Here's one trick you can do. Shoot all your bullets. See, now I have 0 bullets. Instead of clicking X against the doorway to reload, let's pretend this is a doorway. Usually you click X and open the door, and you don't want that, right? Instead, just shoot your last bullet. 0 bullets. If I click the trigger one more time, it automatically reloads for me, so that is a workaround. Crouch button, you want this on hold, allows you to crouch faster. If I have it on toggle, it's a lot slower. Aim button, I have it on hold. You usually want to have this on hold. There are a few good players on toggle, but almost everyone uses hold. Survival slot button on. You want to keep this on because it allows you to use your heat shield and your, your mobile respawn just by clicking left on the D-pad. Now, if you do have an heirloom, you might want to keep it off just because if you are running around with the heirloom and you click that inspect button, you can kind of flip your heirloom like that. If you do have survival slot button on, you can't do that. Trigger dead zones, you want to keep this on none if you can. If you find you're accidentally shooting, you're accidentally aiming down sights, you can move it up. But for almost every controller, you want to keep this on none. Menu cursor speed, I have it pretty high. Now, you don't want it too high that you start missing what you're trying to grab, but you don't want it too low that you can't move fast enough in the death box. Now for default sensitivity, look sensitivity, this is your hip fire. I have it on 4. ADS, have it on 3. This is like the default sensitivity for majority of pro players. For optic settings, I do have this off. However, there is a workaround so I can use ALC per optics with my default sensitivities, which I'll show you in a sec. Response curve, I have this on classic. Look dead zone, I have this on none. It's best to run it on none if you can. If you find you have way too much stick drift, move it up to small or large, but it lets you have a lot more aim control if you do have your dead zone on none. Movement dead zone, again, you want this on small. If you're moving without touching your thumbsticks, then move it to large. But for the majority of players, you should have this on small. Inverted look, keep this off unless you're really good at having it inverted for some reason, but usually you want to keep it off. Vibration, you might like to keep it on because you like the way it feels. However, I highly recommend switching it to off. If you're vibrating while you're trying to aim, it's going to be really hard. You're going to start messing up your shots. If you have it off, you're a lot more consistent, and it can be really weird to get used to. However, in the long run, turning vibrations off is going to help you. And I'll quickly show you how to do these ALC peroptics with your default sensitivities. Go to advanced look controls, turn it on, go to peroptic settings, make sure peroptic settings are on, and then these are what I'm using. You can copy those if you want. And then to use your default sensitivity with these ALC peroptics, exit out of that, turn custom look controls off. And then you can use these default settings for me 4.3 while still having those ALC peroptics. You may think it doesn't work, but trust me, try it out, set it to max settings or like as low as you possibly can and test the difference. Trust me, it works. Now showing you my actual advanced look controls, turning it on, dead zone, I have this on 0%, outer threshold, 1%, response curve, I believe 10 is classic and 0 is linear. I have it on 8, so it's almost classic, but a little bit more twitchy than classic. Peroptic settings, I already showed you that. Yaw speed, I have this on 160, pitch speed 120, and turning extra yaw to 20. The reason I have the turning extra yaw to 20 is because this actually turns off if you have aim assist. Which means if I'm moving as fast as I can while hip firing and I spin in circles, look at how hard I connect to this guy. So I'm pushing on my right thumbstick as hard as I can right here. Watch this. Look at how hard my aim assist pulls. All I'm doing is pushing as hard as I can on my right thumbstick. I'm not slowing it down at all. This is all aim assist. This is why I like to have turning extra yaw up pretty high. It allows that extra sticky aim assist to take place. ADS yaw speed 120, ADS pitch speed 95, ADS turning extra yaw 30, extra pitch, extra ramp up time, and extra delay, all that is on 0. Target compensation, have this on, that's your aim assist. Melee target compensation, this is your melee aim assist, also have that on. Target compensation style, have that default, not PC. PC is 0.4 aim assist and default is 0.6. That's 50% more aim assist if you have it on default, so always leave it on default unless you want to be at a disadvantage. These settings are great and all, but they're not going to do much for you unless you check out this video on how to improve your aim in Apex Legends with a controller.